Good morning, everybody. Happy Tuesday. It's your boy Al. Hope you are blessed getting your day started the right way. I wanted to do this video real quick on my boxing perspective. This is for like my boxing fans, people who know the sport and watch the sport and follow the sport. Over the weekend, something very disturbing happened in the sport of boxing. And me as a former boxer, I take the sport very serious. There was something that happened that was very disturbing to me. And a lot of people got entertained from it, but I did not. I saw the disturbing qualities of what happened. There was a celebrity boxing match between two former NFL running backs. Adrian Peterson, who's one of the greatest running backs of all time, and Le'Veon Bell, who for a period looked like he was headed that way before he had a nasty contract dispute with the Pittsburgh Steelers. It ended up kind of ruining his career, whether you believe he ruined his career or the powers that be did. That's up for discussion for another time. But anyway, these two fellas had a celebrity boxing match. And Le'Veon Bell ended up knocking out Adrian Peterson. And the video's on YouTube everywhere, so you can see the video. But it was pretty intense. Bell lands one right hand on Peterson, and Peterson falls back, hits the deck, and he just kind of goes wide-eyed and stands up, but the referee clearly sees that he's in no shape to continue and stops the fight. This, to me, I saw this and I was very disturbed by it. There are a couple of things that disturbed me about this. First thing, and this is coming from a person who was a boxer. First thing is, people need to understand that you don't play boxing. Boxing isn't a sport that you play. It's probably the most grueling, difficult sport in the world. And there's some grueling, difficult sports, but boxing is probably the most grueling, difficult one. There have been people who've actually died, been beaten to death in the ring. I don't remember ever seeing a basketball player, a football player, a soccer player, a hockey player die in their respective sports in the middle of their respective rinks, fields, courts, or anything like that. But there have been people, Benny the Kid Paret, Dooku Kim. There's a fella, Sugar Ray Robinson, hit with a left hook, killed him. Ezra Charles hit a guy with a right hand, killed him. There have been several fighters die in the boxing ring. There have been grave injuries. I remember one of the potential great fighters of all time, Gerald McClellan, in one of the wildest shootout brawls between the two bombers, him and Nigel Benn, ended up pretty much handicapped. Can't see, can't speak, his hearing's impaired, he's been wheelchair bound for over 30 years now. So this is not a sport. Boxing is not a sport that you play with. It's not a sport that you try out. And I'm just having a hard time, and I was kicking the ball around a little bit with some other former boxers, the fellow boxers, the people from the boxing world. When did boxing become the sport that's been taken for such a joke as far as competing? Nobody would get out and try to play professional football who didn't have the upbringing to do so, right? Nobody would go out and try to play professional baseball without having the upbringing to do so. And then you see this, and you know this, and then you come out into the most dangerous sport in the world, and you want to give it a try. And a lot of these people are finding out, no matter how great you were at football, basketball, or whatever, Dave Robinson found out the hard way. Other people have found the hard way. Boxing is not a sport that you fool around with like that. The disrespect of the sport of boxing is just out of control. This is a sport that you don't just try after a couple of months of, you've been a football player for 30 years, since you were in Pee Wee League, and you've been one of the great football players, and then all of a sudden you want to try boxing. Like, boxing is that big of a drop down from football? No, boxing is above football, as far as difficulty and what it takes to do it. It may not take the athleticism of football, but everything else, it drowns football. As a matter of fact, back in the day, you played football if you realized you wasn't tough enough to be a boxer. The great athletes chose boxing first. That's why you see people like Muhammad Ali floating around, and Big George Foreman and Joe Frazier and all of these guys in a boxing ring and not a football field. Because the boxing got the best athletes first, because that's the sport that everybody knew was the toughest and brought you the most prestige. But to see these guys out here getting in a boxing ring, hurting themselves, is disrespectful to the sport. All of the great boxers that have ever been have boxed from the time they were kids. I'm talking about 8, 9, 10 years old. To be a great boxer, to be even a capable boxer, you have to have developed such a muscle memory over time that allows you to be able to do the sport well, to be capable of doing the sport, participating in the sport, and knowing what you're doing. And even then, you have people who fought since they were kids, trained, been good as amateurs, good coming up through the pros, and they get into a ring with a guy who's got more than they got, and they get knocked out. So we've seen some of the greatest fighters of all time getting there with other greats and get knocked out, lose badly. So I don't understand why people think now boxing is a sport that you just come to and try. A lot of these people are finding out the hard way that boxing is not like football or basketball. I mean, there are no subs when you get hurt. There are no timeouts when you get tired. it's you're in there. There are no teammates. When a guy's jumping on you, there are no teammates to pull him off. There's no coach that's going to jump in there and help you. Get in the middle of a melee. The sport is a melee. A lot of these guys think they're tough. They get in there boxing and find out that you're not. I'm disturbed because I don't want to see these guys like Adrian Peterson getting hit going wide-eyed like that. The first thing that came to my memory was all of the hits he took on the football field. And with the problems that they've been having in football with CTE and a lot of these football players getting violent, particularly after they retire, some of them killing themselves, harming their families. The last thing I want to see is him in a boxing ring getting concussed. And that's exactly what happened to him. He got concussed. He got out of the sport without really having, that we know of, too many concussions. I know they hide a lot of that stuff. But how are you going to make it through that long career as a pro and not get seriously injured and then go to a sport that you know nothing about and get concussions, start accumulating concussions that you didn't get in the world of football? It just doesn't make any sense. It's dangerous. It's dangerous for him. It's dangerous for people that are around him. It could permanently damage him. And then I look at him and Bale in there. Why were y'all in there? Did y'all not take care of your finances? Adrian Peterson played some 13 years in the league. Are you broke? I know Le'Veon Bell didn't really fulfill his potential. He held out in Pittsburgh initially because he wanted more money. I don't think he ever really got that. So maybe he's financially strapped. But let me just say that you guys need to understand that boxing is not the way to get it, man. Don't play with our sport. All the boxers out there can concur. Don't get out there playing with the sport of boxing like it's some recreational thing that you can pick up on the side. It is not. I've seen several football players get out there and try boxing and just get manhandled. It's not a sport. And don't think that don't think that your athleticism will translate to boxing. That's what a lot of guys think. I've been this great, pristine athlete. It'll translate to boxing. It's not about your athleticism. It's about your muscle memory and what you know and your body has been trained and conditioned to do in a ring since you were a kid. The rules of boxing, the rules of other sports don't apply to boxing. Those rules don't apply. The athletes are bigger, stronger, faster. Those rules don't apply to boxing. Those rules that people make when you hear these arguments and these discussions about how, basketball players from the 80s couldn't play today because the athleticism is on a different level. Those rules don't apply to boxing. There was a guy who was a heavyweight champion in the 70s who became a heavyweight champion in the 90s. Now, no other sport you could be a star tailback in the 70s and then come back and do it in the 90s, or be a star basketball player in the 70s, come back and do it in the 90s. But it happened in boxing with George Foreman. There was another guy who became the middleweight champion of the world in 1995 and was one of the top pound-for-pound fighters in the world until 2014. Again, became middleweight champion of the world in 1985. That was in the middle of Jordan's three-peats. That was when the Rockets, we won our second title in 95. And he was a champion, became a champion in the middle of Michael Jordan's three-peats, and was a champion and the top pound for pound fighter in the world up until LeBron's prime. I mean, that wasn't supposed to happen, but it did because the rules of boxing don't apply to these other sports. So the rules of these other sports don't apply to boxing. It's about muscle memory. It's about skill set that you develop over time. It's not about you being the biggest, strongest, and fastest. It's about you being the most mentally tough, mentally aware, mentally quick. Listen, reflexes do have a lot to do with it. But when that does slip, a lot of people have shown over time their wit and skill set can carry the day. I don't want to see these celebrities keep coming to boxing for a quick payday, because that's not what boxing is. Boxing isn't a quick payday. As a matter of fact, boxing is probably one of the reasons why people have abandoned boxing and going to other sports. Boxing doesn't get the athletes that it used to get, is because it's probably the sport that's the hardest to get paid in. I mean, in professional football, you get drafted top 10 pick. You're already a multimillionaire and you haven't touched the field. You get drafted in basketball, top 10, 15, 20 pick. You're a multimillionaire and you haven't shot a shot. Boxing, you could be 30-0, a two-time world champion, and still haven't seen $1 million payday. There are some world champions right now and have been throughout history who were great champions and never saw $1 million payday, never saw a seven-figure payday, period. So now, don't get me wrong, when you reach the apex of the sport, it still blows every other sport away in pay. For those who get to the Floyd Mayweather, Oscar De La Hoya, Roy Jones level, Sugar Ray Leonard level, when you get to that level, the Mike Tyson level in his prime, when you get to those levels, your paychecks will dwarf the top guys in other sports. Mayweather at his apex was making $200-300 million a year. We ooh and ah over the NBA players making $40 and $50 million a year now. Well, Floyd was dwarfing it, and boxing's always been that way. Back in the day when Babe Ruth was negotiating to be the highest paid baseball player in the world at $50,000 a year, Dempsey and Tunney were already making well into six figures. When you look at the difference, it's always been there for the top-notch boxers. But that takes a long time, heart, determination. You just don't come into the sport from basketball or baseball or football or wherever you're from and think you're just going to get into boxing and be great. And these guys need to be able to take care of themselves and their money. Don't be looking for a fast paycheck. You're just going to get hurt. You're just going to damage yourself. You're just going to damage your family. You're just going to embarrass yourself. I mean, there's no good can come of this. Even if you're Le'Veon Bell and you won, no good comes from that. Because it looks like you just hurt, a fellow NFL player. And there wasn't multi-millions involved. It didn't sound like there was anybody in that stadium watching that fight. So there's no good that can come of that, man. I believe that people should give boxing the respect that it is due and leave it to the professionals who come up in the amateur system, fight their fights in the amateur system, come up through golf. Unfortunately, they've taken boxing out of the Olympics. Don't know why that is, but that was so important for fighters turning pro, because the Olympics boxers don't have a college career. Boxers have the amateurs in the Olympics. The Olympics was their, for boxing, it was our Final Four. It was our Sweet 16. It was our Rose Bowl. It was our chance to get on the national stage or world stage and before we turn pro and get people interested that when we go pro, you want to follow us. Just like watching Peyton Manning in the Orange Bowl in college. It's just like watching, Vince Carter when he was in North Carolina, Michael Jordan when he was in North Carolina, going to the Final Four and all of that kind of stuff. Those guys got big like that because you saw them, Shaq and all these guys in college performing on the big stage. So when they went pro, you said, hey, I'm going to follow him as a pro. That's what the Olympic boxing was for boxing. So it's a shame that it's gone. Look at all the Olympic boxers who became famous because of it. Muhammad Ali, a young Cassius Clay, Joe Frazier, George Foreman, that 76 class, Sugar Ray Leonard, Leon Michael Spinks, the 84 class, Whitaker, Taylor, Biggs, Breeden, Holyfield, Oscar De La Hoya, Roy Jones, even though he got robbed, Andre Ward. So it's a shame that that's the case, that we don't have the Olympics anymore. But boxing still needs to be the sport that people take serious. It needs to be the sport that you take the most serious. And by taking the most serious, I mean, stay away from it if it ain't your sport. Don't foul in here in the boxing ring trying to have a second career. Boxing isn't the second career, baby. I'm sorry. It's not. Have more respect for the sport than that. I know I usually don't make a lot of boxing posts, but this one just bugged me. I had to say something about it because I thought it was just outrageous that these two guys were in there. If you like the channel, you like the content, don't forget to click like and subscribe. Don't forget to holler at your boy Al. Again, I hope y'all have a good Tuesday. This is your boy Al. Be blessed.